I've been a certified diver for 11 years. I want you to understand that before I tell you the rest of this, because I need you to know that I'm not the kind of person who panics in open water. I don't spook at shadows. I don't confuse a thermocline for a presence. I've done night dives in the Pacific, wall dives in the Caribbean, wreck dives in the Gulf. I know what the ocean is and what it isn't. This happened off the coast of North Carolina, about 40 miles out, on a technical dive to a sunken freighter sitting at roughly 280 feet. My dive partner was a woman I'll call Jenny, someone I had dived with a dozen times. Steady, reliable, the kind of diver who never over-communicates underwater because she doesn't have to. We descended the anchor line in good viz, maybe 50, 60 feet of visibility at the top, tightening as we went down. By the time the freighter resolved out of the haze below us, this long, rust-streaked silhouette materializing from the dark like something arriving rather than something stationary. Visibility had dropped to maybe 30 feet. Normal for that depth. Nothing remarkable. We had about 20 minutes at depth before our ascent schedule kicked in. We moved along the starboard side of the wreck, Jenny filming, me running the reel. Visibility held. The dive was clean. I saw it on the way up. We had cleared the wreck and were ascending the line at the decompression rate, slow, controlled, stopping at our planned intervals. I was watching the computer, watching Jenny, watching the line above us disappear into blue. Standard ascent. At around 160 feet, I happened to look down. There was something below us. Not on the wreck was long gone below the viz limit. This was in the water column itself, maybe 30 feet beneath my fins. Large. Moving upward. At the same rate we were ascending. I know what you're going to say. Whale sharks follow divers. Silky sharks shadow bubbles. Manta rays drift on thermals. I have seen all of those things, and they are not what this was. What I was looking at had no discernible shape, not the hydrodynamic taper of a large fish, not the wing spread of a ray. It was wide, and it was not exactly solid. It absorbed the ambient light the way deep water absorbs light. Completely. Like a moving absence. I signaled Jenny. She looked down, and I watched her go completely still, that particular stillness that experienced divers get when something registers as wrong before the conscious mind has processed it. We held our decompression stop. We could not ascend faster without risking a bend. We held our stop and we watched it. It slowed when we slowed. It moved when we moved. For 40 minutes of staged decompression, whatever was beneath us matched our ascent rate with an accuracy that no living animal I know of maintains over that duration. At 30 feet, it stopped. Just stopped. While we continued up into the safety stop depth. I looked down at it for the last time at about 15 feet, and it was still there in the dark below us, motionless now, and I had the very clear, very specific feeling that it was watching us leave. We surfaced. We got on the boat. We didn't talk about it for a long time. Jenny's camera had been running the whole dive. We reviewed the footage that night in the cabin. The wreck portion was fine. The ascent portion, from approximately 160 feet to 30 feet, was corrupted. Not damaged. Not glitched. Completely black. 14 minutes of footage, just gone. Replaced with a darkness that had a texture to it if you looked long enough. I have not dived that site again. I have dived other sites, deeper sites, more challenging sites. I do not consider myself afraid of the ocean. But I no longer look down during ascents. Because once you have seen something in the water column that knows you are there, and is patient enough to simply wait below you while you go through the bureaucracy of decompression, you understand something about the ocean that cannot be unlearned. It is not empty down there. And some of what lives there has figured out that the most frightening thing it can do is simply follow. My husband and I bought a 32-foot sailboat the summer after I turned 40. We'd been planning it for years, chartering up the Atlantic coast, eventually doing a blue water crossing. That was the dream. We were not naive about it. We took courses, got offshore certifications, did a dozen overnight passages before we attempted anything longer. The passage in question was a 3-day run from Beaufort, North Carolina to the Chesapeake Bay. Offshore, roughly 60 to 80 miles from the coast for most of it. Standard summer passage. We'd done similar distances twice before. The first night was unremarkable. 4-hour watches, 2 on, 2 off, light winds, 1 to 2 foot seas. I had the 3 to 7 a.m. watch and spent most of it drinking coffee and watching the AIS screen. It appeared on the depth sounder at around 4:15 in the morning. We were in about 220 feet of water at the time. The chart showed nothing unusual flat bottom, no structure, no seamounts, no recorded anomalies. The depth sounder had been reading a clean 220 for hours. And then the bottom reading changed. Not shallower. Not a depth alarm. The sounder showed a second reading, a mass return, appearing beneath our keel, tracking at our exact speed, sitting at approximately 40 feet of depth. Below that, the original bottom at 220. Above that, nothing. In the middle, a return the size of something very, very large. I watched it for several minutes before I woke my husband. I told myself it was a whale. It was almost certainly a whale. Fin whales are common in the Atlantic, and they do swim close to boats. I told myself all of this while watching the return maintain a perfect 40-foot depth directly beneath our hull. My husband came up, looked at the screen, and said nothing for a long time. Then he said, "Whales don't track this precisely." We were doing 6 knots. In the dark. 60 miles offshore. And whatever was below us was matching our speed and our course with the consistency of something that had decided to follow us rather than something that happened to be swimming the same direction. We tracked it for 4 hours and 17 minutes. I know because I logged it. We slowed to 3 knots, it slowed. We turned 15 degrees east, it turned. We went back to our original heading, it returned with us. We made a full 360 at one point, just to see. The return went with us every degree of the turn. At 8:42 in the morning, in full daylight, the return disappeared from the screen. Just vanished. Bottom reading back to 220, nothing in between, water empty. We saw nothing on the surface. No breach, no blow, no ripple. Whatever had been below us went away or went down without breaking the surface. I filed a note in the log because I didn't know what else to do with it. I've described it to other offshore sailors since and gotten one of two reactions. Either immediate recognition, a look that says they know what I'm describing, or something like it. Or polite skepticism that does not entirely succeed in hiding discomfort. The ocean is 9 miles deep in places. We have mapped less than 25% of the seafloor. We share the water with animals that can hold their breath for 2 hours and dive to 6,000 feet. Animals with nervous systems we do not understand. Animals that may be as cognitively complex as we are and live in a sensory world we cannot imagine. I am not saying something supernatural followed our boat for 4 hours across an empty stretch of the Atlantic. I am saying that something did. And I have not been able to make the math work out to anything that entirely satisfies me. And I have been offshore sailing every summer since because I love the ocean. But I don't look at the depth sounder at night anymore. I made that decision somewhere on the sail home, and I have not revisited it. There are questions that are better left as questions. I am going to tell you exactly what I found and exactly where, and I am not going to speculate, because every time I've tried to speculate about it, I end up in a place I don't want to go. I was freediving a reef system off the coast of Florida, a spot I'd been visiting for 3 years, a stretch of coral about 3 miles from a boat ramp I use regularly. The site caps out at around 65 feet at the deepest point, and there's a rock ledge at about 60 that I like to work along because it sometimes has nurse sharks resting under it. I dove the ledge on my 3rd breath hold of the day. Came down the slope, equalized, leveled off at 60 feet, and finned along the underside of the ledge. No sharks that afternoon. Some grunt fish, a small Goliath grouper at the back, the usual. I was about to start my ascent when I saw it at the very far end of the ledge, in the deepest shadow. It was a doll. A porcelain-faced doll, the kind with a cloth body and a rigid molded head, maybe 14 inches long. It was sitting upright. Not lying on the sand, not wedged in the rock sitting. Propped against the back wall of the ledge with its legs extended in front of it. Its dress, pale yellow, disintegrated to ribbons by the water, was drifting gently in the current. Its eyes were open. That porcelain stare that doll eyes have. Pointed straight out from under the ledge. Pointed, as far as I could tell, directly at me. I know it couldn't see me. I know it was an object at 60 feet in the ocean, and I was a diver on a breath hold, and neither of these things has consciousness. I know all of that. I still started my ascent faster than I planned to. I surfaced, caught my breath, made a decision. Dove again. Came back to the ledge. I wanted to look at it more carefully because my brain had decided in the 10 seconds I'd been down there that something about it was wrong beyond the obvious wrongness of a doll being at 60 feet. On the second dive, I looked longer. And what I noticed, what made the specific chill happen that I am still, 2 years later, unable to fully shake, was that the sand in front of the doll was completely undisturbed. Flat. Uniform. Not a scallop, not a ripple, not a fin track. The kind of sand you get at depth when nothing has moved across it in a long time. A doll dropped from the surface would not land upright against a rock wall. A doll placed there by a diver with tanks, the exhalation alone would have disturbed that sand for feet in every direction. A doll that had been there long enough for the sand to settle that flat would not still have its eyes in place. Porcelain takes damage, mechanisms corrode, things break down. These were the things I was thinking on my surface interval. These and one other thing. When I had come to the ledge on my second dive, the doll's head was angled slightly to the left. I am still certain that on my first dive, it had been looking straight ahead. I did not go back a third time. I swam to my boat, loaded my gear, and drove home. I have been to that reef many times since. I have never gone back to that ledge. A friend who studies marine biology told me, when I described it, that there are documented cases of objects settling into odd positions on the seafloor through current patterns, that it's theoretically possible for something to be placed in a seemingly deliberate way by water movement over long periods. I thanked her for the explanation. I have thought about it many times. It doesn't touch the part that actually bothers me, which is not how it got there, or how it stayed upright, or even whether it moved. It's that when I think about that ledge, and I do think about it, more than I'd like to admit, I keep coming back to one question I cannot answer. What was it waiting to see? I grew up on the coast of Maine. My father was a lobsterman fourth generation, and I spent my childhood on or near working boats. I am not superstitious. I grew up around fishermen who were not superstitious. The sea is a practical environment, and the people who make their living on it tend to be practical people. What I'm about to tell you happened the summer I was 26, crewing on a friend's lobster boat for the season while her regular sternman was out with an injury. The boat was a 42-foot Duffy, reliable, well-maintained. The work was exhausting and methodical in the way lobstering is: haul, bait, set, repeat, 6 days a week, pre-dawn to early afternoon. We were hauling a string about 8 miles offshore when the engine died. Not unusual, older diesels do what they want, but it chose to die at slack tide, no wind, and a dead flat calm that made the ocean look like something poured from a mold. That particular quality of stillness you only get offshore on certain August mornings, where the water and the sky share the same flat gray and the horizon line almost disappears. My friend went below to troubleshoot the engine. I stayed on deck, eating a sandwich, watching the trap buoys. It was absolutely quiet. No wind, no birds, no traffic. The water made no sound against the hull. I heard a voice. From below the waterline, not from below deck, I could hear my friend moving around in the engine compartment, and this was not that. From below the waterline, from the water itself, a voice speaking in what sounded like, and I am going to say this carefully, what sounded like words, without being words I recognized. A cadence that felt like language. That had the rhythm of speech. That rose and fell like a sentence. I went to the rail. I looked over. The water was so calm that I could see into it clearly, maybe 8-10 feet. Nothing there. Open water, the shadow of the hull, the surface tension catching the light. Nothing. It spoke again. Longer this time. A full paragraph of sound, if that makes any sense, the way you can tell a sentence from a word by duration and by the shape of it. Not loud. Just clear. The way a voice sounds when you hear it through a wall, muffled in quality but not in intent. I called down to my friend. She came up. I told her what I was hearing. She stood at the rail next to me, and we waited in silence for about 30 seconds. She heard it too. I watched her face do exactly what mine must have done: the initial dismissal, the confused recalibration, the very specific stillness of someone who has heard something their brain is refusing to categorize. She stood at the rail for a long time after it finished. Then she said, "Get the engine going," and went back below. We got the engine going. We finished the string. We went in. We did not talk about it that day or the next. She brought it up once, at the end of the season, over beers on her dock. She said, "I've been out here my whole life. I've heard humpbacks moaning, I've heard seals barking, I've heard the cable from a drag fisherman 6 miles away. I don't know what that was." I asked her if she thought it was trying to say something. She looked out at the water for a while before she answered. Then she said, "I think it was saying something. I don't think it was trying to say it to us." I've thought about that distinction for a long time. The difference between being addressed and overhearing. The difference between something that has noticed you and something that simply exists alongside you, conducting its own business, in a language and for reasons that have nothing to do with your presence. I think that's the version that actually keeps me up. Not that it was talking to us, but that it wasn't. I used to do open water marathon swimming. Not competitively, I wasn't fast enough for that, but I trained seriously, and in the summers I'd do distance swims that most people would consider unreasonably long. 10 miles, 12 miles, once 16 miles along a protected stretch of the Gulf Coast. I had a kayak escort, a GPS tracker, and a detailed protocol. I was careful. I was always careful. The swim in question was 11 miles, point to point, along a barrier island chain in Florida. My escort was a friend I'll call Donna, who had kayaked for me a dozen times and knew the route as well as I did. Conditions were good. Light chop, 2-foot swell, visibility in the water around 15 feet. We started at 6 in the morning to beat the boat traffic. I was at roughly the 9-mile mark 2 hours and 40 minutes in, feeling strong, maybe an hour from the finish when Donna pulled her kayak close to me and said, "There's someone in the water behind us." I stopped and treaded water. I turned and looked. About 300 yards back, there was a figure in the water. Swimming. Our direction. No wetsuit, or none that I could see at that distance. No escort craft. No cap or goggles that I could make out. Donna said, "They've been behind us for about a mile." A mile. At approximately the same pace I was swimming, without any of the support equipment that makes pacing a long swim manageable, in a stretch of water between 2 islands with no beach access. You can't enter from ashore at mile 8. The nearest boat launch was several miles back in either direction. I watched for a few minutes. The figure was definitely swimming, not floating, not drifting. A recognizable freestyle stroke. Steady. Maintaining the distance. "Are they okay?" I asked. The question felt strange as soon as I said it, because the figure was not swimming like someone who needed help. They were swimming the way I was swimming. Easy. Efficient. Purposeful. We called out. The water and the distance swallowed the sound. No response, no change in pace, no acknowledgement. I made the decision to keep going. Donna radioed the Coast Guard to flag a lone swimmer in the area as a potential safety concern. We continued, and I swam the next mile, looking back every few minutes. For most of that mile, the figure was still there. Consistent 300-yard gap. Same stroke. Same pace. At one point, I slowed significantly, telling myself I was drafting and the gap held exactly. Half a mile from the finish, I looked back and the figure was gone. No shore to have exited from. No boat that could have picked them up. Donna would have seen it. Open water in every direction. And then nothing. Just the swell. Just the chop. The Coast Guard checked the area. No swimmers reported in distress. No boats flagged a pickup. No swimmers registered for any permitted open water event that day. No one matching the description reported to any marina along that stretch. I have thought about this so many times since. I have thought about current, about visual distortion across open water, about the ways distance and fatigue can interfere with perception after 9 miles. I have thought about all the rational possibilities. What I cannot explain away, what my brain has never fully processed into something comfortable, is the consistent 300-yard gap. Not 300 yards and closing. Not 300 yards and falling back. 300 yards and holding. For a mile. Of open water. Like something that knew exactly how far back to stay. Like something that had done this before. And knew the route. And just wanted to be there when I finished. Even the darkest stories leave something behind. Stay with me. There are more stories.